Hey guys, SimCoder here, and today we'll be starting on writing some code for our Twitter app. So in this lesson we'll set up Firebase and we'll start working on the Firebase authentication. So for this lesson we won't deal with wrappers, we'll deal with provider, which is a package that we will use in the future. We'll just create a simple login and registration system, and then in the next lesson we'll work on how to share that information with the entire app and how we can change the routes that are shown to the user depending on the login state. These routes will be either the main part of the app, which contains the tweets, the feed of the user, and the auth part, which contains the login system, depending on if the user is logged in or not. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Before carrying on with the video, I just want to let you know that only around 20% of you guys are actually subscribed to this channel. So if you don't want to miss any single video in the future, be sure to subscribe and to hit the notification bell. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is to come into Firebase and add a new project. This is important because Firebase will contain all of our services that we'll be using throughout this series, including authentication, database, and storage. So it is a really important one, and it is serverless, which means we don't have to deal with any Docker or anything. It is created for us, and it is scalable, not by us, but they auto-scale the application depending on your needs. So it is really awesome, and most people seem to go with serverless more than ever. So let's do it. Let's call it Twitter Dev, which will be our project for this series. Continue. Add the default account for Firebase. You can create one. This is just for the analytics of your project, so no need to worry about it. Give it some time and I'll be back shortly. After it has done loading, just click continue and you'll be taken to the main page of your project, Firebase project. This is where everything happens. So you can see that in order to get started, we have to add an app. So in here you choose if you want iOS, Android, or for JS. In this case, I'll be showing you how to do it for Android, but it is really easy to do for iOS and even easier to do for the web. So where we are going to go is coming to this page, firebase.flutter.dev /docs/overview. This takes you through all the steps needed in order to add Firebase to your Flutter project. So, as we can see, the first thing that we have to do is to install Firebase within our project. For this, we are going to copy Firebase core and the version that it is currently on, go to our project, and let's make this bigger, okay, like that. And in here, let's close everything. We are going to go into pubspec.yaml. And in here we have all our dependencies and all of the packages that we'll be using throughout the application. This contains general information about the project, and as you can see, there are a lot of things in here like the name, the description, the version, things like that, the SDK, everything is contained within this file. So our dependencies as well. So if you want to add Firebase core in this case, and you can easily see from here, we have the dependencies, then Flutter, SDK Flutter, and then Firebase core. And pay close attention to the indentation in here, because that's what defines what it corresponds to. It is like Python. So if it is like this, then it is inside Flutter test. If it is like this, it is inside that dependency. So it is really important for you to get this right. Okay. Then we have to run this command, flutter pub get, which will just install all of the dependencies that are currently within the project. So let's copy that. Let's come in here, open a new terminal, and I'm going to simply paste that in here and run flutter pub get. So it ran, no errors popped up, which is awesome as always, and we are able to continue. So, as I told you before, we are going to run the Android installation in this lesson. For all of others that you might need, iOS, the macOS, the web installation, then just follow up with those tutorials. For the Android installation, we are going to jump right into this link, and simply do the process that's in here. The process is the same if you are building just an Android application, a native Android application. So it is basically the same thing. And if you came from some other tutorials that I did on Android, then you'll be familiar with it. Okay, the first thing that we have to do is to add this class path. This class path will be inside the Android folder. And let's go into build.gradle, better yet, and just add the class path in here. Let's collapse all of this to make some more room. And there we go. Save it, save everything. And then we need to apply plugin to the other build Gradle file. So in Android, you have multiple Gradle files. And the other one, let's try to find it, is in the app, which is right next to the source, which contains the source files of your Android app. In this case, we are going to come in here, and we are going to go down below and below the com.android.application. I'm going to paste the apply plugin com Google GMS Google services in here, and that's it. Now we don't need to do all that much else. Now, there are some warnings in here. Obviously, you probably need multi-DAX, and this is needed whenever you go above the DAX max size of 64 KB. I believe that's the limit. So in this case, we will, and because of that, we must enable this function. So for that, let's go into our application, go into default config, and simply add multi-DAX enabled true in the default config. It is Android default config. Okay, and by doing this, we'll be able to compile the project and no errors will appear. We also need to add the multi-DAX implementation. So that's done in the dependencies down below. Simply add it there, save it, and in here indentation is not an issue because it is using brackets for us. Okay. So that's it. Now we have to initialize Flutter Fire, which is in here, initialize Flutter Fire. Okay, that's the next part of this lesson, and now we'll learn how to actually use Firebase within our project. However, before that, we must run and find a SH1 key that is provided by our computer. So, in order to generate this key, and this key will make sure that the Firebase project can only be compiled by our PC, so if you want to use multiple PCs, you'll need to rerun this tool yet again. We'll run this command for that. So, jump into our project, open a new terminal, run it, and an error appears in here. I'm going to run it once at a time, so copy that. Delete that, change it to Android, and run .gradle sign-in report. Now, an error appears, and it is saying that it is not finding Java Home in our path. It is boring to deal with that, so I'm going to go the easy route and open up Android Studio for this, because you should already have it installed, just to not waste any more time. And now, when we are in our Android Studio, I'm going to go into Gradle, Android, Tasks, Android, and click on Sign-in Reports. Simply run it and wait a second, it will provide the code for you. Okay, after it has done compiling, you get the SH1 key, copy that, go into your Firebase project, click on Android, and simply add it in here in the debug signing certificate as SHA1. Okay, now for the Android package name, what you have to do is, if you don't remember the package name, one easy way of finding it is to go into source, main, Android manifest, and you can find the package name in here. So that's what I'm going to copy and paste it there. Okay, now register the project. It will give you a download link, which you'll click on. This is the Google services.json, which is the file that will allow your project to actually run this Firebase project. Okay, now you are shown all of the things that we already did, so no worries about that. Continue to console. Now, with this Google services.json, we are going to quickly paste it in this source folder. So just grab it and paste it in here. and it isn't in the source folder. I'm sorry about that. Move into the app folder. It should be in the same folder as this build.gradle. And there we go. We have Firebase implemented. Now, all that's left is to actually start writing some code. Okay, so now in the Firebase dashboard, we are going to go into Authentication, Get Started, and in here we are going to enable the email and password login, which allow us to actually sign in with that. We are going to only use email and password, but you are free to use any other system that you have in here, as it is pretty much the same as the email and password when it comes to implementing it. For the phone authentication, however, it is a bit tricky, and there are a couple of more steps that you must take, but yeah, we are going to keep it simple and just go with email and password. After that, when we actually register a user, the user will appear in here along with all the information that it's provided to us by Google. So there we go. Now let's close all of that up and go into our code. This is our main.dart. Now, there isn't much in here, so what we'll do right now is to come in here, create an Auth folder. Let's make all of these bigger. Okay, and in this Auth folder, we'll create a new file, which will be called signup.dart. So in this case, we'll be using a stateful widget, and we can use the awesome Flutter snippets for this, the package that we installed in the previous lesson. And just by typing here, we see that the boilerplate code is created for us, and we are able to, just by typing once the name of the class that we want, to change all of the relevant variables within it. So sign up, and I'll explain all of this in a second, don't worry. And we are going to import imp m. This will import a material pack which is needed in order to have a stateful widget, or widgets in general. So what's the difference between a stateful widget and a stateless widget? Stateless widget doesn't have a state, as the name implies. So the class would be the same, the widget will be the same from the moment it is created to the moment that it is destroyed. A stateful widget, with a stateful widget, it doesn't happen that way. If the state changes, which just imagine as a global variable for the widget, which contains all of the information of the widgets, it isn't like this per se, but imagine it is, as it is easier. Then the widget is re-rendered, and everything is re-rendered yet again, over and over again. The best way of thinking about this, if you come from React, is the difference between the function components versus the class components. It is basically the same. So in here, we see that we have our main class, which is the signup class, which extends stateful widget, and then it creates a state which is applied then to this class. So in this class, we see that it has a build function, and this build is responsible for rendering out the application. And anytime the state changes, this is re-rendered over and over again, as I've said. So in here, we have our render function per se. So in here, we'll have our all of our data, all of our elements, all of our widgets that will appear on screen. But before that, and before carrying on, we are going to go into main.dart, and we are going to remove the my home page. This is because we obviously won't need it. We'll call our own widgets and not the ones that were provided to us by Flutter. So let's delete all of this, all this boilerplate code that we don't need. And in here, instead of my home page, we'll have the sign up page. If you click it, it will auto import it. So there we go, exactly like that. And there we go. Now, if we save it and rerun the application, now we are unable to run the application because in here we have this child which doesn't exist yet. So for this, I'm just going to say text auto import from the Dart page and give it a text which will be just hello. Okay. Now, by saving this, everything should be fine. So let's try to run the application and see what appears on screen. And there we go. One thing, don't forget to run the application while on main.dart, otherwise it won't work. Now on sign up, you see that hello appears. It isn't pretty, but it appears, so it is a good sign. Now let's try to make it a bit better looking so that it is actually useful and usable by the user. Okay, so and now instead of a container, which we are using right in here, we are going to use what's called a scaffold widget. A scaffold widget is really useful because it creates a basic boilerplate of a material UI screen. So in that way, it is much easier to work with, and it gives you all the tools needed in order to create a good looking screen. In this case, we'll have a couple of things within the scaffold, which you are able to see when you do control and hover over scaffold. You see that we have an app bar, we have a body. So the app bar is obviously the app bar, as you know, that we have the go back button, for example, things like that, options, the name of the app, whatever. Then we have the body, which contains all of the main elements of the page, and then we have some other things that you can have, like a floating action button, which will appear on top of everything. So the first thing that we have, obviously, is the app bar. So let's add an app bar. Let's make this bigger, okay? And this app bar has an app bar widget, which you call like this. And it can have actions, which in this case we won't have. We'll keep it as simple as possible. We can set a background color, for example, and this will be colors dot blue. Let's make it blue in order for it to pop out. And as you can see, we now have an app bar shows up in there. Then we can say that the elevation will be 8. This just gives a bigger a shadow to the app bar, which you can barely see in here, but yeah, it exists. And then we want a title for the app bar. So in this case, it will be title, sign up. And if we add it, and in here it isn't title, I'm sorry about that, you in here define which widget will appear in there. So in this case, it is text. So if you want a text to appear in there, just add title, 2 points, text. Okay, it is as easy as that. However, app bar is constrained by some things, so you can also always do control hover over the widget that we are looking at and see which parameters you can change and which parameters you can't. So in here you'll see the title and you'll see the elevation, you see the background color somewhere in here, the background color, and so pay close attention to it. Flutter isn't the most user-friendly in that sense because each widget has really specific things which you can mess with or not. Okay, so now onto the fun stuff. We are going to add a body, and now it will have a container. A container simply contains something. It is the corresponding thing that I can tell you is like container is a div for HTML. So it does basically the same thing. It just contains something within it. It is a box with stuff in it. It doesn't have any real value or anything like that. So the container can take in a couple of parameters. The first one, which I'll talk about, is the padding, which is obviously important because we don't want elements to be stuck up right against the wall. So for that, we'll use a function which is called edge insets. This will be symmetric, which means that both sides will be the same with the same padding. Then we'll say that the vertical one will be 20 and the horizontal one will be 50, for example. Now we have our padding. However, nothing shows up because we don't have any elements within it. So for that, we have yet another parameter for the container, which you can see in here, which is the child widget. When you add a child, you can have multiple things within it. In this case, it will have the first child, and you'll get why I'm doing this in a second. Let's just make this a bit nicer. So this child will be a form. A form is yet another Flutter function, a Flutter widget, which is specific for forms. So whenever you want the user to input something, you usually use a form for that. And the childs will most likely be text editors, will be, or better yet, a text form field for Flutter, which is the edit text for Android and submit button, things like that. So in this case of the form, and it is important to use a form because it will give you the tools needed in order to show errors, to show multiple things, and to more easily do it, instead of just using a regular container. So for this form, we want the widgets that are within it to be within a column. A column just means that all of the widgets that are in this child tree will be stacked, so in vertical form. So column, import that, and there we go. Now we want to add children, and as you can see, it is an array, so it will take multiple widgets within it. And we can say that, well, first of all, we are going to add a text form field. Text form field is an edit text, as I've said before, and it will allow the user to write on it. As you can see, we already have a text form field in here. Okay. Now we want to on text change to update variables so that we can later on use them. So that's a function that we can use within our text form field. So on changed, we say that the val of it will be, and we say equal bigger than, it is an arrow function, and we can set states. This set states, which I'll talk to you about in a second, will update the state of the widget that we are on, not the text form field, but the SignUp widget. So the email will be equal to val. However, we don't have an email variable yet. We must create it and add it to our SignUp state. So up top in the SignUp state, we'll say that string email is equal to nothing. Well, because whenever this widget is loaded, we won't have anything in it. We can also go ahead and create another string for the password, which will be basically the same logic. So now, whenever we type in here, this email will be updated. And we'll also always have the latest value of this text form field. Okay, so now we are going to quickly double up on this and add yet another text form field. In this case, instead of email, it will be password. So add it in here. And now we have two. There we go. The first one will be for email. The second one will be for password. Now we want to add the final piece of the puzzle, or the final two pieces of the puzzle, which will be the raised button. The raised button is just a normal button which has some raise to it, so it looks a bit better. There are simple buttons in here, but let's use the raised button for the time being. So on pressed, for now we'll leave it at null because we don't have a function to call up yet. And as you can see, when I save it, the button will appear in here. But we want to add a text to it. So we have a parameter in here. If I do control and hover over the raise button, you'll see that you are able to add childs, and child will appear in here. There we go. So in this child, you can have anything that we want. In this case, I want a text. And this text will be sign up. And when I save it, sign up will appear in here. Now, it appears like it isn't a clickable because onPressed is null at the moment. So it will change in a second. So right now, let's write the function for onPressed. And onPressed, as I've said, will contain the function which will actually sign in the user. So let's come in here and say, let's do enter in here just to make things a bit easier to see. There we go. Now in here, we'll do parentheses, async, which because it will be an async function, asynchronous function, better yet, and open curly brackets. Now in here, we'll have the function which actually does the sign up for us. So it is actually a really straightforward function, but before we run it, we must do one thing before that, which is to initialize Firebase Auth. So in order to initialize Firebase Auth, we are going to come up in here and do Firebase auth, which doesn't exist yet. As you can see, it is undefined, nothing appears. And why is that? Well, the reason why that happens is because we must import Firebase auth into the same place where we imported the Firebase core. Okay, so now in order to actually add the Firebase authentication in here, what we are going to do is going to firebase.flutter.dev. And in here we have all of the information that we need. It is under the authentication tab. And as you can see, we have the dependency that we need right in here. So let's grab it and paste it in here. And after we click on save, it will automatically run Flutter pub-get. Okay. So now what's left is to go into usage, and as you can see, we have all of the information needed in here. We'll need to get, first of all, the import package, which we'll have to add up top in the SignUp.dart. Then we'll have to add the Firebase auth variable, which simply initializes the Firebase auth class, which allows us to do anything that we want with it. Okay, and after that is done, we are free to go down below into email, password registration, and sign in, and actually create a new user. This is the code that handles that. As you can see, you have create user with email and password, which takes as parameters an email and a password, and that's enough to create a user. So we'll add that as a function in here, which we'll create right now. So let's call it void the sign up action, and this will be an async function, which will take care of signing up the user as the name implies. So we'll just indent that, click on save, and let's see if everything checks out. Well, we aren't calling the function yet, so that's what we have to do now. Go to onPress and add the onSignUp action. Now I'm going to actually rerun the app because an error should appear when we do this. Okay, and so we get this error, Firebase initialize app has not been created. So we must handle this. So Firebase must be initialized in order for us to use their services, mostly to use the Firebase auth at this moment. So that's handled all in main. And in order to fix this, we are going to go into Android installation in here, go down below, and go into initialize Flutter Fire. And in here we have a tutorial on how to fix this error. So we are going to first import the Firebase core into our main.dart. That does nothing yet, but the most important part is in here. We are going to copy this final future Firebase app initialization and the build function. When we do this, and we are going to paste it in here, let's make this bigger, okay? This handles a future. A future is something that we made the request for, but we don't know when we will receive it back. So in this case, we'll make a request for Firebase to initialize the app, but we don't know exactly when we'll receive the data for it. Okay, and we see that we have a builder. A builder will contain the return material app, as we do, in this part, just. And the reason why it is inside this if is because whenever the future gets updated, if it has an error, if it has a new connection state, if it is loading, this builder will get called upon. So whenever the snapshot.connection state is connection state.done, then we'll show the material app, which we'll call sign up. If there is an error, then we can show something in here. And if it is loading, we can simply show a text with the text loading, for example. Now, even though we made this alteration, it will probably still give an error at this moment. So let's try and see why. Resizing this. Okay, probably there's a 50-50% chance that an error will appear like this, even though we have this code which is provided to us by Flutter Fire. And that's because we must add a line of code in here which isn't in the documentation. Let's make this bigger and say widgets Flutter binding dot ensure initialize. This will make sure the widgets have loaded and only then make the request for the future. So in this case, it will load up nicely and no error will appear. So now in the email, we are going to remove this email and password because we want to, instead of using the hard-coded text, we want the text that the user has typed in. So let's add password and email there. Password, there we go. Let's zoom out a bit and see how everything looks. So we have the sign up action, which will be called in here. And then we expect the data to appear in our Firebase project. So let me open it up. Okay, and in here it should appear, the user should appear once we sign up. So let's try to do it right now. So test@gmail.com, for example, and I click sign up by mistake, so nothing will appear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The password must be 6 characters or longer. And when we sign up and go back to Firebase, then the account should be created. And there we go. It is created. However, it is created with the old email that we have here, and that's because I missed the parentheses that was in here. So right now, if we reload the project, and let's give it some time, okay, and do a test@gmail.com, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and sign up. If we go back to the Firebase dashboard, we see that test@gmail.com appears in here. So it is working. Now, if we want to do a sign in, it is pretty much the same. So let's try and do a sign in action really quickly. The sign in, instead of create user with sign in and with email and password, it is sign in user with email and password, and this will handle all of it for us. So now the sign in action must be called in another button, which will create just by doubling up the button that we already have in here, and say sign in action. Sign in the text. Okay, so now we are able to sign in and sign up with no issues whatsoever, and it should be working fine at this moment. The issue is we don't have any feedback from the project to give us an indication that we are logged in, that we aren't logged in, anything like that. So that's what we'll take care of next. We'll use a wrapper in our builder in here, which will handle checking for, listening for auth changes, and if there is an auth change, then show the routes according. So if we are not logged in, show the screens of the auth system. If we are logged in, then show the screens of the main app, which shows the feed and all of the information of the user, the profile, all of that. So the app will be separated into those two fields, and we'll use a wrapper for that, which will be really interesting. But yeah, for now we have the basic Firebase implementation, and everything, both the front end and the logic of the app are in the same class, which is not desirable. We'll change that next also. So thank you all so much for watching. We have our login system working. In the next lesson, as I've told you in the beginning of the lesson, we'll work on combining this with the rest of the application and learn how we can make sure the entire application can get the information needed, and that only the routes needed by the user, if the user is logged in or not, better yet, show the corresponding screen for the user and the corresponding route for the user. So yeah, it will be an interesting one. So make sure you are subscribed so that you don't miss a single thing. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow, and ciao!